Good evening, Laura Donnelly with day 225 of Strange and Interesting Times. Well, they've been very strange. They've been going on and staying strange. So then today I wrote or the other day, I've been sending people notes for Thanksgiving. And like I talked about in the beginning, I've been trying to check in with people. I have a lot of friends all over the world and all over the country. And many of them I haven't seen for a long time, a lot of years. But because of the whole closure thing with COVID and everything, I've been spending a little bit extra time reaching out and contacting people. And so doing that, I wrote to a friend, and she had last year at Thanksgiving, we invited her to go with us to visit my cousin, because my cousin lives in this most awesome part of Kansas. It's down in the south central part, and it's called the Gypsum Hills. And the land is red and sandstone and beige, and there's canyons and there's bluffs. It's not huge. It's not like Colorado mountains or anything, or even the foothills, but it's not flat. It's great cattle country, not really great farming country, but some people down there raise cattle. But I wrote to my friend and just said, last year it was foggy when we went, and you could hardly see, and this year it's sunny and bright. And she wrote back and said that she had been thinking about this, and she couldn't remember if it was 2019 or 2018 when she had gone with us. And then I started thinking about how things had gone. And when the closures happened, she pretty much sequestered herself. And I would call her up and say, look, I have tomatoes from my garden. I have lettuce from my garden. Do you want something? And we would meet in her yard and exchange things from a distance and catch up a little bit. And then she moved. And so in a very bizarre way, it's almost like she didn't move till October or the end of September, something this year. But it's like she was gone starting in March. And then I was thinking, they have this really cool thing where my cousin lives, and my cousin and her family participate. It's called a peace treaty, and it's a huge pageant, and people come from all over, and they bring. Last year, this guy brought all these longhorn cattle, and he did a trail drive from the western edge of Kansas all the way across the southern part of the state to the central part. And he had to coordinate with all the landowners and get permission to march his herd through their land and graze them and water them along the way and take them back the same way, because it was over 100 cattle. And I don't know why they thought to do it. Maybe just for fun and an adventure, or that it was way too expensive to haul that many cattle and stressful on the cattle. But they were part of the pageant. So like at a certain point, all these longhorn were like spread all over the field, because this happens outdoors in this huge field. And actually it's kind of a basin, and the natural land is up high around it. And so you sit up and watch like a natural amphitheater. It's really great. And then they did a kind of a staged stampede off, and you saw all these beautiful cattle with these different patterns, because like our cattle are like you have red Angus and black Angus, and you have these white cattle, and most of the cattle you see are one color, and the longhorns are multicolored. They're like paint horses, sort of. They can be any color. It's really amazing. They have these huge horns. Anyway, obviously I'm digressing, but it only happens every 3 years. And so we went down to the last one, and we're like, when was this? Was this 2017? Was it 2018? I know it wasn't the fall 2019, And my husband has this thing that he does, which is really cool, which I try to do. I don't always do it so well, but I try. And is to keep track of the trip. When you leave, where you stop, how long you stop, so that if you're going to make the trip again, you know how long the trip is, and a little bit of what you might want to stop and do along the way too. So like if you stop at a historic site and walk around for an hour or something, but in your mind when you get to the new place where you're going, you think, well, it'll take you 5 hours. Well, it didn't take 5 hours to drive. It took 5 hours because you spent an hour or an hour and a half at this historical site. So this is like a trip journal, but not pictures but it's just the car and the miles and the road and the highway and the times. So we went back into the book and we found it was 2018. It's kind of fun. It's kind of good. So I got another thing I did, and I can't remember whether it was 2016 or 15 or 17. So I'm going through the book again because I have the trip marked down, and I will know when I marked it down when I went. So this is again not like if you go somewhere every week on the highway, we don't mark those, but the longer trips where we're going and what we're doing. So that's a kind of a journal. And I started thinking when I was emailing my friend, and then talking to my brother, my cousin asked me, how long has it been since your brother has been home for a holiday, Thanksgiving or Christmas? And I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know. So that's another thing to follow up on. He comes at different times of the year when it's easy for him to get away, when he doesn't have a lot of work. And as I talked about a couple of days ago, traveling on the holidays can be so stressful that then the joy of the holiday is a little bit compromised. I mean, I remember some years buying presents in New York and then packing them and, trying to find small enough things that I could pack in my suitcase, then wanting to carry them because, because then they started having the guys all go through your suitcase. And what if not all the presents were there? What if or packaging was messed up? So then you put them in a bag and it's your carry-on. Oh, I mean, I tell you, gift cards aren't very fun, but when you live far away, gift cards are so much easier than that I was trying to do then. And that made the holiday not fun, not really fun. And now shipping is not reliable. I mean, like a letter that should take 2 days right now takes 5 or more, which is also very strange. So then you got to pay the extra to do the tracking. So a lot of things that used to work really well don't work really well, and then this whole thing with the closures and not having the mile markers in the year for events that you would do, kind of an annual thing that was a celebratory thing, whether it's an anniversary or a birthday or Mother's Day, Father's Day, any of those things that might be a kind of a marker in the course of your month or months of the year. So I think I talked to a couple friends real early when this started, that if you keep a journal, the journal is going to become these important historical documents of what happened. Now, there's going to be the news footage and whatever, but everyday people's lives, these are the things that history is made of. And so there's some really brilliant oral history video recordings on YouTube. I think they were made in the 80s, but they have to do with the Spanish flu epidemic in the early part of the 20th century. And they talk to people who lived through it about what their lives were like. Because there's a kind of the historical medical record, and then there's the people who lived every day and lived through the whole situation. So you don't really know what will happen to your journal. I mean, if you burn it, you know what happened to it. But if you have kids, they might really, really be interested in reading it, long after you have passed away. If you're a child growing up, or you have kids who are growing up, and, maybe they just write once a week or something, you know, but when they're grown up, this is something that their children might find really interesting and educational. And and then you have your digital calendar, and you can kind of keep track of things on your digital calendar. Met so and so on this date, did this on that date. But the whole digital thing is based on electricity, which can go off. So I would say, even if you got a digital journal, back it up on paper, print it, do something with it so that you have it in concrete form. And then that way you can look back on it on these strange times, these strange and interesting times, and say, those were some strange and boring times. No, it's not too boring, actually. It's not too boring. It's a little bit weird, but not too boring. Often surprising to me how fast things are cycling around, repeating. Events in our lives, those things kind of repeat, like important events, but they're usually spread further out than this period of time, which seems both intensely compressed and vaguely spread out like taffy. And I think it's kind of important to observe how you respond to the situation and what makes you, what I want to say, nervous or unsettled. Maybe unsettled is a better thing. Like how when your stomach isn't settled, stuff doesn't just set right with you. What about this situation makes it feel unsettled? And what about it maybe makes it feel kind of adventuresome? Who do you know who lived through this? My grandparents lived through the first one. They were in their 20s during the first, during the Spanish flu epidemic. But they never talked about it. I never thought to ask them about it. I mean, I knew in history, like history class, I knew it happened. But really, and until this happened, and I started looking at my family history, and when my grandparents got married, they got married in October 1920. So right near the end. Not, so hopeful. They're just going on with their lives because this is what you do. You just live the best you can every single day. And it was just something that happened. They didn't say, it never even came up that they had lived through the Spanish flu epidemic. Now it's Kansas. They might have felt a little guilty because they survived. Because this is how we roll in Kansas. But they also might just have thought, well, this is just something that happens, and we'll keep going and we'll see what happens next. Later, my mom and my grandma, I don't think my grandma had, I think my mom had smallpox, and maybe her sister had smallpox. And my cousin and I were talking, and we don't know. My cousin's mom was 6 years younger than my mom, and we don't know when they had the smallpox. We just know that they were quarantined in their house, and that my grandpa wasn't quarantined, and he had to bring groceries all the time. And then I inherited my mom's smallpox immunity. I never had a vaccine that took. Now, something I learned this weekend was when my cousin's kids were little, and this would have been probably the 80s. She tried to get them a smallpox vaccine, and the doctor said, "Oh, we don't do that anymore. We don't have that. We don't store it. We don't stock it. We don't do that." And she's like, "What if they want to go, somewhere in the world where they have smallpox still?" And they go, "Oh, I guess we would have to get it." So there's a strangeness there. So she doesn't know if her kids are immune to it or not. She had a, it makes a little scar, makes a scar kind of like a burn. It would be terrible to have all of smallpox. That would be terrible. But she doesn't know if her mom had been even born when this happened to my mom and my aunt and my grandma. And I realized I don't know. And there's nobody left to ask. I'm going to ask my other cousins. They might know, but they might not know. And if nobody wrote it down, we're not going to have those pieces of information because it wouldn't have been in the newspaper for sure. So some of this stuff that seems very ordinary. Now, listen, there's a toilet paper shortage. 20 years from now, probably nobody's going to believe that there was a toilet paper shortage. But that's one of the most bizarre things about this whole thing in my mind. So, writing that down would be interesting, and how you resolve that situation for your family or not. But these are the kind of things that I think 10, 15, 20 years down the road might provide some insight to what happened. So those are my strange thoughts for today. Maybe not so interesting, but strange. And I'll see you tomorrow for day 226. Take good care.